Hi everyone, and welcome to our Global E-commerce Masterclass series. Today we have our e-commerce in the USA session being the 10th of June. I'd like to welcome everyone that's joining, all those from Queensland, US, and from around the world. We'll first start with an acknowledgement of country. Our First Nations people are our first traders. Trade and Investment Queensland acknowledges their many nations and many trade routes, their giving of safe passage and their exchange of knowledge, culture, spiritual beliefs, songs and dance, natural resources, food and goods. We respect their wisdom, resilience and pursuit of trade in ways that enrich their communities and guarded the beauty and riches of the land. We embrace this long history and the present and future contributions from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to the prosperity of our state. For a bit of housekeeping, today's session will be recorded, so we will share a link after this session that you can then go back and watch or share with your colleagues. There's a Q&A function as part of this webinar, so please drop your questions in the chat and we will reserve them for the end of the presentation. Again, after today, please book a consultation with our trade service team here at TIQ. Again, my name is Andrew Higgs and I'm a manager here at Trade and Investment Queensland and delighted to bring you this presentation. A little bit about Trade and Investment Queensland and what we do. We're the Queensland Government's dedicated global business agency for international investment and trade. We are around the world in 27 locations in 18 international markets and across Queensland with 8 regional locations. Our role is to connect Queensland to the world and the world to Queensland, driving global business opportunities. And it gives me great pleasure to first introduce Vicky Forrest, who's our Queensland Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner for the Americas. Over to you, Vicky.
Thanks very much, Andrew, and it's great to welcome you all to today's webinar on the world of e-commerce in what is the largest consumer market in the world, the United States. To set the stage for today's discussion, here are a few statistics. Australia's online sales in 2024 was $69 billion. The US online sales for the same year were $1.2 trillion. 273 million Americans made an e-commerce purchase in 2024, and over 80% of the US population shop online. Of course, Amazon has dominated this market with 37% of US e-commerce retail sales. Then there's Walmart and Apple, eBay and Target, but they're not even close contenders to Amazon. Some of the major e-commerce categories we've seen are consumer electronics, fashion, home goods and furniture, health and beauty, and second-hand or re-commerce platforms. We've seen dramatic changes in e-commerce over the last few years, both in the way consumers shop and the expectation of rapid convenience, and in how businesses operate. Traditional retail models are increasingly blending with digital solutions, particularly in areas like AI-driven retail, data analytics, cross-border shipping and digital marketing. Some fascinating trends also include social commerce, the rise of platforms like TikTok Shop and Instagram Shopping, facilitating direct purchases through social media and increasing access through buy now, pay later services, offering US consumers flexible payment options. This all brings significant opportunities for Queensland businesses, but there's also challenges such as complex regulatory environments, of course, the evolving landscape of tariffs, and staying ahead of the latest technology advancements. Understanding how tariffs work in your particular industry and how they interact with US customs regulations is more crucial than ever in ensuring business continuity and profitability in this highly competitive e-commerce market. So, this is the impetus for today's session. We've got experts to provide insights into how these trends, including tariffs and compliance, are shaping the e-commerce landscape, and more importantly, how Queensland businesses can leverage these changes and strategies to win. For a lot of our clients looking to enter the US market, e-commerce can offer a solid foundation for building a track record and generating demand for your products in this market. Please actively engage with our speakers, ask questions, and take full advantage of the insights shared today. From our team in North America, Hannah and Anise are your first points of contact on entering the US market, and they're here to help you understand and navigate the opportunities and complexities of this market. Thank you again for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to the discussion ahead. Back to you, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Vicky. Again, our first speaker is Ruben Quinones, who's the Strategic Performance Marketing Executive with AMSIV Digital, and he'll be providing some insights into the e-commerce landscape over in the USA. Over to you, Ruben.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew. I was hoping you were going to screw up my name because I had a big joke lined up for that, but you did a good job. So thank you, everybody, for attending. Go over a few slides today. I'm going to concentrate on the U.S. It's just a snapshot of the e-commerce landscape in the U.S. market. I think Vicky touched on it a little bit, but when they'll go into what are kind of like our go-to-market strategies are, a snapshot of what that looks like in the U.S. market, and then talk about some tool sets that you should be aware of in this market. So we can go to our next slide. Again, we hit on this before, but we're going to be closing in on $2 trillion by the end of the decade in online sales in the U.S. market. Almost half of this is mobile. As Vicky mentioned before, top categories include electronics and fashion. But there are two high growth niche areas that are coming into play, auto parts, if you're in that space, or food and beverage. It's another high growth niche that we're seeing in our market. And for the US market, it's all about convenience at the end of the day. So think about that when we talk about PDP optimization or the Amazon storefront. Making sure that we are leading in with convenience is an important factor in the US market. Next slide. I think, again, we hit on this before. Really, it's a duopoly here in the US market. It's Amazon and D2C, right? So as mentioned before, 37, I think to 40% of sales are on Amazon. So it's not an afterthought here. It's actually one of the main drivers. And then there's other marketplaces like Walmart, Costco, eBay. I think in your market, it's a bit more diversified. Our two major platforms are going to be Shopify with Shopify Plus and BigCommerce. But at the end of the day, if you need to go to market quickly and you don't mind paying the fees to Amazon, you go with the Amazon storefront. With a higher investment, you can go D2C. Obviously, the benefits of that is that you get to collect your own audience and really build your brand equity that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do on Amazon. So, but a hybrid approach is best. Next slide. We'll talk a little bit more about just an overview of how we go to market in the U.S. market. Next slide. We can in the U.S. market, we really, and again, might mirror what you experience in the AU market, is we think paid search, meta, and retargeting, those tactics and channels are our go-to marketing strategies for digital. It's usually where we see our highest conversion rates. And it works well when it's more of a commoditized product. If you have a more unique product or a lower AOV, we're actually seeing more of these platform shops do better, like a TikTok. If you have a $20, $40, $50 widget, you're going to get a more frictionless experience on that social platform, and people will not blink an eye just because of going back to the convenience factor. Big piece for us also is for performance creative is what is the emotional storytelling, and obviously combining that with an urgency driven offer works really well. So offers, storytelling, important when it comes to telling a story, or when it comes to building your creative online. And making sure that your messaging is highly relevant, not necessarily localized unless it's state by state level, but making sure that you're relevant with the visual and your messaging. And then understanding what the differences are between the US and the AU market, which we'll go into on our next slide. I would say less ability to test more in the US market because you have to be highly efficient. The CPMs are just higher in our market. It's usually where the testing strategies happen. We're just more mature. So expect higher CPMs relative to the AU market. A core strategy, again, for us, it's Amazon. It's a go-to. Meta is saturated, but it's still an effective channel. In some cases, outperforms search, depending on the category. And SMS and mobile messaging, that's an expectation. We're loyal to our brands and we're loyal to the process here in the US market, even to the point where we don't mind getting text messages. So that shouldn't be an afterthought in our market. It actually should be part of your core strategy. Unlike the AU market, we're a lot more diverse in our buy now, pay later preferences. Anything from Klarna to Afterpay, ShopPay, Affirm, these are all well-known brand names that the consumer is familiar with on a D2C website. Going back to that convenience factor, shipping expectation, I'm sorry, we're impatient here in the US market. It's 2 days or less where you guys have a little bit more patience. So keep that in mind, especially if that's a unique selling proposition. Some compliance considerations that I want to kind of round out on our next slide is, that's a cue for the next slide, is our tax and duties, right? So with taxes, it's state by state level, where tariffs, you guys may have heard of that recently coming out of the US market, that is, and I can't forecast that for you, that'll hopefully stabilize in the next few months. That'll be more of at the federal level. So think of sales tax done at the state by state level, import duties, that'll be US Customs Border Control, or protection rather. Sorry, it's a big thing going in the US market. Labeling laws, if you are in food and beverage or health or beauty, think of what the labeling, making sure that you're compliant with FDA or FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission, or Food Drug Administration, making sure that you're disclosing your product, which is the truth in advertising and country of origin labeling. And again, this is more important for those two category levels. Other compliance considerations, again, the more diversity that you can bring into that checkout experience, the better, because you can increase your conversion rates. You can test that out as well. We have clients where they may have Stripe and Visa, MasterCard, and we'll test whether PayPal will increase conversion rates. Obviously, you might be compromising on some fees, but if the conversion rate is incrementally better than what you're performing now, then it's best to obviously roll it out site-wide. And then other considerations, California is a hot state for data privacy, so you can treat that separately. There's a lot of plugins for this as well on Shopify that can help you through that and navigate that process, where it can have shipping that's, or rather considerations for data privacy for California versus the other states. Returns are, again, a big thing. US shoppers expect a generous return policy, again, going back to those convenience factors. And so to round it out, wanted to kind of leave you, and hopefully I'm doing well off time, or maybe I'm going too fast, but it'll allow for some more questions down the road. Some tools to help automate and analyze and help scale. With fulfillment providers, ShipBop and EasyShip are two go-tos for fulfillment providers. For analytics, GA4 is typical standard. I also see for more enterprise level clients, we'll see Adobe Analytics. If you are thinking, or you're more enterprise level and you're thinking more attribution because you have multi-channels, Northbeam is a good attribution tool, third-party platform that will help you attribute and credit your different channels. As far as tool sets for marketing, think Klaviyo for SMS messaging and messaging, mobile messaging in general. MetaVantage Plus would, again, Google that and look into that a little bit more, where there's more audience options. Performance Max is much more mature here in the US market and has actually been doing well within Google's suite of products. And then the dust hasn't settled here, but I would start thinking about AI-powered workflows. How do you automate the process? So it's not just about, hey, AI, it's about what are sophisticated workflows that I can integrate into my platform. Shopify has plenty of AI options. There are tool sets like N8N as well, Zapier, and some other codeless platforms that will help you build out workflows to streamline communications as well as your sales process. And with that, I think I'm done. Just want to make sure I'm leaving time for the rest of the presentation. But I would ask you, if you have any questions on this, I do actually will leave you with a PDP optimization checklist. Whether that is on building an Amazon storefront or your PDP on your own website, all you got to do is connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll get that to you. It'll be linked to a Google Sheet. It's one that we use at the agency to help optimize web pages or PDP pages. So I will leave it as a leave behind after this presentation. Just link up with me. All right, Andrew, I guess I'll kick it back to you.
Thanks so much, Ruben. A terrific presentation and lots to cover. I think that there were a few questions. We will be sharing this presentation after with the post-event survey. And also there was a question about AOV, which is, of course, average order value. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Mary-Ann Roden again to TIQ. She has delivered an earlier presentation back in March. She's the CEO and Director of the E-Merchants Trade Council. And she'll be providing the latest advice on tariffs in the USA for e-commerce. And it seems, Mary-Ann, we need to be, updating things on an hourly basis at times with the Trump administration. So over to you, Mary-Ann.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks to TIQ for having me back. You could go to the next slide. Keep going. The next slide, obviously, is the famous chart that the president stood in front of. We have, 34%. There are negotiations in London with the United States and China that cover Hong Kong and Macau. 10% for all other countries, 90 days. Now we are on that 30-day TikTok or deadline for going down to July 8th. So that's going to be a big deadline. We have an agreement, supposedly with the UK. But for Australia, the big thing to know is you've got a general duty rate for Australian goods of 10%. But then June 4th, the president did raise the steel and aluminum tariffs back up to 50%. So that came out, that was a proclamation that came out on June 4th. So if you are in those products, you have to look at all your derivative products as well. Next slide. Okay. I think a lot of people may care about de minimis. So that is the administrative exemption that we use under the customs statute for goods under $800. And that's where we have a lot of activity. People look at it as a tariff loophole. It technically is not. However, the president has issued a series of executive orders to block de minimis shipments, particularly from China, Canada, and Mexico. So that's still into effect. The Postal Service, they did block it, but they need a company to collect the duties, and that's what they're working on now. The reason this is an issue for Australia is we have noticed that there are many people online, particularly TikTok and other social media companies, that are purporting to give advice to e-sellers who may manufacture or have goods manufactured in China, and they're trying to use Australia as a transshipment point. That the goods would go from China to Australia and then from Australia to the United States. And I'll get into country of origin a little bit later. But these are the big executive orders, but this area has been very active. Next slide. Okay. So we've got the Geneva negotiations. They're going now. They're in London. We've got rates going up and down. So right now it's 54% for goods made in China. Postal is still an issue. However, the president is still have a per piece of $100 per postal shipment, and that's usually handled by maybe large express air couriers who carry the mail as well. Next slide. Okay, so this pretty much is a grid that shows you the same information that was on the previous slide. Next slide. Okay, so not to get too technical here, but I wanted to show you the phenomenon that we've had that I really didn't deal with a lot, even though I practice international trade law for 15 years, this idea of stacking tariffs. And if you don't have trade expertise yourself or inside your company, and you're working with a logistics provider or a broker, freight forwarder, you should go through this with that service provider. Okay, so this is a little chart that's showing you the comparison of just importing t-shirts, Canada, China versus Mexico. But I've shown you a tariff page that shows you where you find those different rates. And the idea is these are all cumulative. Okay, and that's what makes them so onerous. Typically, you would have just one tariff rate from column 1 of the harmonized tariff schedule, that 32% MFN rate, and that's it. One line item on your entry. Now we have possibly 6 line items or 6 tariffs that could apply to that single product. So it's highly unusual. The second point here is it's not just the duty rates that may be an issue. They are ad valorem rates. Okay, so they're based on the value of the product. But if you have a direct-to-consumer shipment, even though the value may be fairly low, and even the duties, don't raise it that dramatically, you will have to pay fees, a merchandise processing fee. So the minimum fee is $32.71. So that's a customs fee for modernization, and an LCB, licensed customs broker fee, to make a formal entry. And that's probably $20. At least that's the lowest we've heard of. So you can see in the bottom line of the totals how much that $5 t-shirt is going to cost you. You see how that accumulates. Next slide. Okay, here again, this is actually featured in the New York Times. So we know we're in trouble when the nitty-gritty of a paperwork of what we do for a living is a front page article in the New York Times. Okay, and what I like about this is if you look at the body of the customs entry, it shows you all the different line items and the duty rates. Like I said, those stacking rates. That's pretty unusual. We've really never had that in the past, except in the rare cases where we had a Section 301 unfair trade practices products, typically from China. So the entry summary, it's filed by a licensed customs broker. The entry has the classification, multiple duty rates. It'll have the value, the quantity, country of origin, and then any applicable fees. And so you can see how that declared value of $23,000, once you get through all those rates and then you get the fees, you're looking at $34,000 that you owe to U.S. Customs. Next slide. Okay, so this will be good for you. I won't go into detail, but what this slide does is it really pieces out each part of the entry summary, so you can see exactly what each part of that entry summary refers to. Next slide. Okay. In addition to the president's executive orders on de minimis, there's also Customs has proposed a new rule on the entry of low value shipments. Now, this was released in the waning days of the Biden administration in January. Typically, when a new administration comes in, they automatically put a freeze on all proposed regulations that came out 90 days prior to taking office. President Trump did not do that in the case of low value shipments. That means there's pretty much bipartisan consensus on dealing with low value shipments. Now, this has been released in January. The deadline to file comments was in March, and we filed comments, and the agency is going through those comments, and we expect a final rule probably actually in the next month or so. Depending on, there's about 90 to 100 comments that were filed on each. And they're going to talk to the White House because this is a very sensitive topic. So what I'm trying to say to you is you've got executive action on, these low value shipments. You have the agency taking action, and these are all on separate tracks. Next slide. Okay, and now we have legislation. So, unfair foreign taxes. This is an issue that we dealt with a while back, probably around 12 years ago, I would say, right before President Trump came into office in the first time. There were many European countries and Canada that wanted to impose digital services taxes on the large U.S. tech companies, Amazon, Netflix, Facebook. And so what they did is, let me back up. We treat the cross-border movement of physical goods versus digital goods differently. Since 1995, there's been a moratorium on digital transmissions, and that is renewed every 2 years at the WTO Ministerial Conference. That vote has gotten closer and closer every 2 years, and it's very controversial. Now, many developing countries want to do away with that moratorium because they feel that they're losing out so much revenue, particularly VAT. Now, as Ruben indicated, the United States doesn't have a VAT. We're the largest economy that does not. But many countries do derive an enormous part of their national revenue from a VAT. The next vote will be March 2026, and it's going to be very contentious. Now, a lot of this was supposed to be resolved in the WTO Work Program on Electronic Commerce. That agreement just came out, 6 months ago, and the United States hasn't really signed on. It's not final yet. It's still being negotiated, but that's supposed to deal with digital goods. Now, the reason this might be important for you is you may have products, if you're in the healthcare industry, you may have a product that is both a physical good, but it could be beaming data back to you for, health purposes, monitoring purposes. Let's say a tractor. Many tractors will beam to, let's say, John Deere or any other company, information about that mechanical vehicle on the wear out of parts and things like that. So more and more products are becoming what I would call hybrid products, meaning they have a physical aspect, but also a digital component as well. So then we moved into the OECD Global Minimum Tax Treaty to solve this issue, because all these European countries wanted to impose a 15% tax on the digital companies on the activity in their territory. The Biden administration signed off on that agreement. We were going to have a 15% minimal tax, but they didn't submit it to the U.S. Senate for ratification as a binding treaty. They were just agreeing to it and going along with it. And of course, the vulnerability is the Trump administration came in, and on day one, he said, we're not we're not going to abide by this agreement. So we're sort of back to square one, where countries now are threatening to impose that 15% tax rate. Okay. The reason this is important is because the One Big Beautiful Bill, H.R. 1, has passed the House and is now pending in the Senate, is very controversial. It does have a provision in it that would have sort of a remedial retaliation against certain types of taxes that are imposed by other countries on the U.S. and U.S. companies. One of them is that digital service tax. And it's a 5% increased tax rate on income withholding real estate distribution for each year of the applicable date. So it could go up to 20%. So if you have any operations here in the United States, and let's say Australia imposes a digital services tax on the United States, your income, your real estate in the United States could be subject to that retaliatory tax. Next slide. Okay. Also in H.R. 1 is a provision that will end de minimis for all countries. So you see that 1321 A2C, it excises that $800 de minimis totally. So that's it. It's over. Okay. And so one of the things you have to realize is this administrative exemption grew very dramatically over the last several years to now that we have 1.36 billion shipments that come in duty-free. In fact, it's 92% of all shipments come in under this provision. And so what that means as a consequence is now if we get legislation, that will override the president's executive orders, and even CBP's proposed regulations, because legislation in our hierarchy of law has the higher authority, and if it's passed later than these other types of actions. However, what Congress has done is it has an effective date of July 1st, 2027. That means we will have 2 years of adjustment. Okay, so we'll have duty-free entry for a couple of years. Okay, another big issue, first sale, declared value. A lot of people on social media are telling people there's an easy way to cut your duties down, and that's to have what's called first sale. But you have to have back-to-back transactions, meaning there has to be a transaction from the manufacturer to the middleman, and then the middleman to the U.S., and that good has to be clearly destined for the U.S. I would say be careful using this. Most e-sellers or companies that sell omni-channel do not have the internal sophistication or the trade expertise to use this. And I could see the government getting rid of it. They haven't talked about it yet. But again, be very, very careful. A lot of people are trying to sell it. It is not an easy fix because you have to document the whole transaction. Next slide. Okay, country of origin. This is another big issue. The country of origin of a product is where it's made or where the substantial transformation happens. In the case of the low-value shipments in the de minimis environment, by the statute of 1321, it's based on the country of shipment, not the country of origin. Okay, so there is a difference. And once de minimis gets pulled into the normal trade environment, we're going to have country of origin, usually China, as the most important data element. So even if it goes through Australia, Canada, Mexico, another third country, it doesn't matter. It's still a Chinese-made good. That's also very important for you in Australia. If you have an Australian-made product, certainly see if you can meet the free trade agreement requirements to make sure that it's a Australian-made good under the FTA. But you'll have to do that analysis. Okay, let's keep going. Next slide. This is pretty much the same thing. You got a reference there for the free trade agreement. And remember, that item must be marked made in country, so made in Australia, okay? And it has to be legible and clearly printed. Incoterms, very important. Those are set by the International Chamber of Commerce. It's not statute, but we are seeing strange Incoterms on low-value shipments. So most direct-to-consumer shipments are DDP, delivery duty paid to a named destination. But we are seeing MDDP, where they're trying to combine first sale and delivered duty paid, and that's not a legitimate Incoterm. Next slide. Okay. Again, I think we talked about this. This is the transshipment issue. Just don't do it. You're setting up yourself up to customs fraud. Now, a lot of people in China, they don't care because they'll never get caught. But if you travel to the United States or have a lot of shipments to the United States, you will get caught, and whoever your American counterpart will get caught as well. Okay, items regulated by a partner government agency. As Ruben indicated, there are other agencies that regulate U.S. products. There are 47 federal agencies. They share all that data through a single window for admissibility, and 13 of those agencies, like FDA, have what we call release and hold authority. If you bring in something that is regulated by the FDA, U.S. Customs cannot release it until FDA authorizes its release. And that's about 30% of the goods. Consumer Product Safety Commission is also a lot. If you make products that are for children, designed for children 12 and under, it's Consumer Product Safety Commission. Remember also with FDA, USDA, EPA, science-based agencies have a different view of risk than customs. Okay, it's either yes or no if there's a hit. Whereas customs, if you have one container that has an infestation, okay, you just mitigate that 10% hit. With FDA or EPA, you got a hit. It's yes or no. Okay. Next slide. Court cases. This is the latest thing that has happened. It's a lot of activity where people have sued the administration over the imposition of tariffs. We got the first regular case, VOS selections, and the Court of International Trade in New York ruled that the president went beyond his authority to impose those tariffs. It was immediately appealed up to the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, which put a stay on everything. So people were popping the champagne bottle saying, okay, we're going to get all our tariffs back. And the Court of Appeal said, not so fast. This case will probably go all the way up to the Supreme Court. The de minimis case is following as well. Okay. Yeah. Andrew, I'll hand it back to you and we can handle the questions later.
Thanks, Marianne. Your presentation was quite comprehensive. Again, we will be sharing these slides after. There are a lot of considerations, in trading and selling to the US, but we're fortunate to have individuals like Marianne and others on our panel that can help answer these questions and support you in your launch. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome two additional panel members, Ishan Gemini, who is the General Manager of Woolly Play, a Queensland exporter. Also Kobe, who's a Senior Coach and Meta Ad Specialist at the E-commerce Equation. And I'll welcome back Ruben and Marianne, who will join us for this panel session. So we will, if you've got any questions, again, I'd encourage you to type those in the Q&A section and we will read those out live. So there are a few questions, however, that I have. And first I'll start with you, Ishan. What were the steps that Woolly Play took to successfully enter the US market?
Well, thank you, Andrew, and hello, everyone. US is a big market. We did not take it as a joke. We took it very seriously before we launched. I don't know if many of you are aware, Woolly Play has been doing business in America business B2B. So we were trading with big box retailers such as Walmart. We had products on their shelves, but prior to COVID, it kind of all stopped. And then we only had one reseller, Family Ledger, based in North of America, selling our trampolines. We did attempt to go in US around 2017, where we had not succeeded, and purely because we wanted to do the things we did in Australia, and we thought because we're a big brand in Australia, we're going to work in America. I think that self-awakening pushed us to then find the product mix that will work in America. So first thing we did was looked at our range and developed a range that will be unique and will get the competitive advantage in America. So we launched our product relaunched our products in 2024. We went into the US market in 2023, direct to consumer, starting out in basically California and Texas initially. So it's just getting the understanding of the market was the biggest challenge, because the US is so different, very big, vast population. You can burn off your marketing dollars really, really quickly if you're not careful. So we spend a lot of time experimenting, understanding what works, what doesn't work, even though we got the product mix right. Our products were highly popular when we launched, and we were surprised that, okay, it's going to work. So we started working towards tailoring and a marketing approach that would suit our brand. Nobody really knew us because those US is a big place with 300+ million people. Those few thousand units we sold through Walmart and stuff were nowhere near to get us the brand awareness. And I think it was Ruben who mentioned that US customers are very brand savvy. They're very loyal to where they've been buying. So I think that's something we also learned. Understanding that Amazon is a really, really big play in America. And if you're not on Amazon, it's going to make it very, very hard for you. So we've been trying to adapt or come with a strategy that will get us a name for ourselves. So I think these are the few steps that we really took to successfully launch in America again. The first time didn't work out, but with these preparations and having been there before, we were pretty ready to go to penetrate that market again.
Ishan, what do you think was the biggest challenge that you faced kind of during that launch?
So the biggest challenge was just the scope of the market. And also it's a saturated market. So trampolines, we sell monkey bars, play sets. It's not a new product. The product has been out there for many years, and Americans have a similar lifestyle to Australians where they have backyards, and they love their backyards. They're massive backyards. They've got obsession with large and extra large products. So one thing we found was making a name for ourselves again, finding something that worked, finding marketing that worked. So we started working on making Woolly a household name in the United States. We introduced an entirely new brand into a competitive market. So we had to come up with social media marketing on Google and Meta, together with influencers in America that helped, and moms basically who had followings that helped us reestablish ourselves in America as a household name. It's an expensive product we sell. Our products aren't very cheap. So people need a little bit of investment to basically even consider us. There's so many good options on Amazon, like cheap options, $200 trampoline, $300 trampoline, and then here we are selling up to $2,000 per trampoline. So it's a big leap, and I think that's where I think our biggest challenge was. But working together, understanding and experimenting in the right areas, having the right product mix, we were definitely more prepared.
Thanks, Ishan. Yeah, I'll bring in Kobe from the e-commerce equation. So, look, Kobe, based on your experience, what are the most common mistakes you think that Australian brands make about entering the US e-commerce market, and how do you think that they can avoid them?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. But first, thanks for every speaker so far. Really enjoyed the session up to this point. Learned a lot myself. And yeah, after working with thousands of brands up till this point, there's one brand in particular that comes to mind because last year this fashion brand was trying to crack the U.S. market and but only managed to generate around 120K in April 2024. But because they haven't been able to sort out these three mistakes that I would say have been quite prevalent across the brands that we work with. So once they were able to resolve the main issues that I'm going to talk about, they were able to do $1 million just in the US alone in April 2025, which is, I think, amazing. But I think the first one is kind of similar to what Ishan already mentioned, which is expectations, right? And I think what this brand was trying to do is trying to push their bestsellers in Australia to the US market, as opposed to identifying what the US actually wanted. But maybe it was also the wrong timing to push some of those products, right? So I think don't expect the same campaign, the same ads to work in the US as opposed to Australia. I spent a lot of time in ads manager, and I would say one of my love languages is meta ads for sure. So do a lot of, I think testing is definitely crucial for a lot of these brands. And once we were able to test, we're able to comfortably spend around 10K a day on meta ads with 3 to 4 ROAS by doing so. But to do that, you have to test with a proper framework. The other part was also adjusting their pricing. Another part with that Ruben also mentioned is how some people might be impatient, some people might be expecting fast shipping, and some people might want free shipping, right? And some Australian brands might take in a lot of a lot of shipping costs if they ship to the US market, and they sometimes still expect the customers to pay for that. So as opposed to adjusting their pricing to accommodate the shipping and find a middle ground that's a little bit possible. So we tend to focus a lot more on the unit economics and making sure that we identify how to maximize the profit for the brand to make sure they can pay for the advertising costs, they can pay for the product costs, and they can still generate a lot of profit. And I would say that's probably the most common mistakes that brands typically make.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Kobe. A question back to you, Ishan, is how have you navigated the recent US tariff implications for your business operations? As I said, in respect to the manufacture of your products and how that's impacted your pricing strategies.
I think being proactive would be a summary of how we managed is we were probably ahead of the game. We had a lot of stock which was already on the way in the United States prior to these big hefty tariffs. So we then started playing with pricing to make sure the stock on hand that we had basically extend the life cycle of our stock. So increasing the price is simple economics. You reduce the demand and you make per item. And then also, if the tariffs were staying, it would gonna be a simpler transition for a customer to then pay from, for example, what they were paying a month ago. So we had a blended approach where we hedged our bets by balancing pricing. Also, we had some excess stock because our sales dropped. The moment you increase prices, the number of units you sell also drop. We then diverted that stock to Canada and actually capitalized on this opportunity to find a new market. So now we really has successfully entered Canada. We have our stock on the way there, and we're starting to see that it's also a very attractive market for products. So it's again being proactive. And another thing is we partnered with TIQ and got in touch with Hannah, who's done put us in touch with the attorney over there who helped us with our journey on tariffs, gave us the right advice early on. So we're not speculating, we're not wondering, we're not risking ourselves and our containers have on at the port. And yeah, we were prepared. So we believe in getting the right advice at the right time, just because being surviving in an industry where you sell kids products, you have to make sure what you're really selling. And if anything goes wrong in America, it also impacts our brand in Australia. And we wanted to give just focus on what customers are getting, a product and our brand, and forget all this noise behind the scenes. We deal with that. So I think together we tailored a strategy that worked and still made sure that customers have access to Woolly products in the market.
Thanks, Ishan. I will take a question from our Q&A chat, and if you do any big questions, please include them in the chat there. But Nikki Warren is one of our Queensland exporters. Her question is, our analytics in Shopify show us there is interest from US consumers, and we do have about 50 orders per month from the US. But whenever we have tried to advertise there on Meta and Google, it hasn't worked. Years ago, we did sell on Amazon US, but we had some really weird reviews come through that I think were from competitors trying to get rid of us out of the market. Do you think we should try TikTok instead? So perhaps Ruben or Kobe, if you've got a bit of an approach or response to that one, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I'll pass it to Kobe real quick because it depends a lot, obviously. Average order value, bidding strategies within the platform. So there's a lot of nuances to this.
Yeah.
But also the more commoditized it is, it might be saturated, let's say, on a Google. But Kobe, if you have a different experience, I guess it's big depend on there.
So I agree with Ruben. There's a lot of nuance to this question. I was actually writing that word in the box, and but the fact that you have 50 orders per month, that shows you have product to market fit.
Yeah.
That's the first thing to note. But what people typically get wrong is product to market fit organically that you're getting is a whole different beast to advertising, right? Advertising is a different language, and the way you approach advertising requires the right framework, using the right campaigns, using the right content that resonates with the US audience. Because when you're because some people often say, I spent this amount on ads, but I'm not getting the same I'm not getting the result that I'm expecting. But spending doesn't mean generating the same outcome. It's spending the right manner on these platforms, then would increase your chances to increase the outcome. It's not like you put $1 and guarantee $3 will come back, or $5 will come back. Is the way you approach it. But as I said, the good news is 50 orders per month is a good sign that you have a market over there. Maybe we just need to tweak some of the approaches there, but it's impossible to give the right framework without looking at what you've done. But yeah, TikTok would be interesting because what Ruben said, maybe organic might be a good start to figure out how to communicate with your customers a bit better.
I will leave you with one tactic. Maybe take those 50 orders, and I don't know what platform that is, but you could create a lookalike off of that audience and test that. But again, there's a lot of nuances to the question. But I mean, if you can take your higher performing conversions maybe and replicate that, that might be a go.
One other thing as well is I would just do a post-purchase survey for people coming from the US and just ask them, how they found you and what made them buy from you.
Good responses. I think with any survey, remember when consumers are completing it, perhaps to provide an incentive or a discount or voucher, just to ensure that they complete that. Our next question comes from Nicole Hansen from our colleagues at Logan City Council. Her question is, Australian consumers seem increasingly cautious about online shopping scams. Are similar concerns emerging among consumers in the US market, and what measures are being implemented to address this issue? And I think also to that, we're mindful of AI and various scams. As a result, it is becoming more difficult to differentiate what's real and perhaps what is AI generated. So if Marianne, I'll perhaps include you, or if anybody else would like to help answer that.
Yeah, this is currently happening in the United States, and it's very difficult. And we noticed a phenomenon where e-sellers were getting their stores or their shops suspended on certain marketplaces, and the e-sellers were getting very upset at the marketplaces because they thought it was due to a change in the terms and conditions by the marketplaces. But we went to them and said, so one of the examples is the marketplaces were asking for a more precise description of the product. Or if you were a reseller of a branded item, you had to submit more documents authenticating that you were an authorized reseller. And so the e-sellers were getting very upset. And what we went to them and saying, this is not a function of the terms and conditions that the e-sellers have. It's the proposed regulations from customs that is cracking down on those issues for counterfeits of branded items, but also precise descriptions leading towards, the harmonized tariff schedule at the 10-digit number. So that's happening right now, and it's a big issue where the government is using and working with the marketplaces to become more strict in what's offered, and so they can do more enforcement. And it's been very difficult for the e-sellers.
Thanks, Marianne. I'll perhaps move on to our next question. This one's for you, Ruben. So perhaps you can take us through some effective digital marketing strategies that you've seen work in the US, in particular with what's currently going on in that market.
Yeah, and this might be global to any market, right? I always say they're the 4 Ws, so I'll take a high level approach. The who you are, what is the product, right? Product clarity, because all the tactics that line up, descriptions, tags line up with, what this product is about. Another W is, who is this for, right? What's the audience level, whether that's Amazon or anywhere else? Who is a good fit for this? Why should I care, right? So whether that's reviews, benefit statements, and then what do you want me to do next, right? And as far as how we test against those 4 Ws, conversion rate optimization, right? So a lot of testing in our market to kind of understand, hey, if we tweak messaging or benefits or added reviews, will we get incremental conversion rates as a result of this one test that we've implemented? So it's pretty big here in the US. There are tools like VWO that help you with optimization or CRO work. The surveys you mentioned, we may use Hotjar to kind of, again, get an idea of what you're seeing in the market and why people may or may not be purchasing from you. That, and then the second piece is audience-led strategies, right? That may work outside of the walled gardens of Google and Meta. So there's a lot of agencies that are really kind of creating their own models or proprietary tool sets to try to create lookalike audiences that are transferable to any channel and not necessarily plugged into just Meta or Google's ecosystem, if you will. So those are kind of two big strategies I kind of see playing out here with agencies and brands in the e-commerce landscape.
Thanks very much, Ruben.
Sure.
Marianne, another question from yourself, from somebody that writes in. Is there a view on whether the US authorities are going to be able to cope with the additional burden if and when the de minimis exception is removed, and how this might delay delivery times for e-commerce orders sent from Australia to the US? I think there was kind of hold up in some China orders recently as well.
Yeah.
For consumers.
Oh yeah, they just stopped taking them. Yeah, and DHL for a couple of days, they stopped processing certain de minimis orders because it took them a certain amount of time to file the entries, and they couldn't do enough of them. This is where we're really going to have a problem, because we're going to go right now. U.S. Customs clears 30 million entries, and we have to deal with the 1.36 billion shipments, individual direct-to-consumer shipments. Now, some of those go through Canada, Mexico, and the fulfillment warehouses, and then are just coming in when it's ordered online. This is going to be a huge problem, and we are bracing for our computer system, the automated commercial environment, the ACE system that CBP uses to process those electronic entries to really melt down. Because we've had brownouts and issues in the past, so the system could become very, very unstable. So we just don't know. What we're hoping that will happen is that some of the marketplaces will ship more in bulk rather than individual shipments at a time. So it depends on how they do the logistics and then do the entry, whether it's a consolidated entry or not. So we're just worried that the system won't be able to handle the volume.
It's certainly extensive. Thanks, Marianne. Look, another question from somebody that's written into our Q&A is, do you suggest to use a US-based social marketing agency for that market, or a directed social media advertising? So, Ruben, if you'd like to pick that up.
Kind of biased, but it depends. I'm actually a big proponent of if you can keep that in-house because it's your brand, truthfully. Yeah. And it depends on what social you mean. If it's just content dissemination versus influencer marketing, right? I think, agencies here might have an established infrastructure of network of influencers that they can kind of tap into. So again, I hate to say it depends on what it is. If you can't hire from within, I think there's probably more maturity with the agencies and their established networks in the U.S. market than what you're probably going to experience with an AU-based market.
Thanks very much, Ruben. Again, another question over to Marianne is, how do you think e-commerce businesses can ensure their products meet US labeling and certification requirements?
Okay, so the two things that you have to keep in mind, there are basically two sets of regulations that you have to comply with. There is the basic US customs, country of origin, and the labeling made in Australia requirements, and that applies to all goods. Then you do have a second set of regulations if your product is regulated by one of those 47 federal agencies. So, for example, FDA will have very specific regulations on, drugs, devices. If you have something that is alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, they're very specific about those labels. Food products, obviously, very specific. Products that are for children under the age of 12, Consumer Product Safety Commission. So you will have to look at that agency's specific regulations. And that's why you really probably should confer with, a trade expert here in the United States or your logistics company. Hopefully they'll have a counterpart in the United States of how to comply with those requirements.
Thanks very much, Marianne. We'll go to our last question, and this is for you, Ruben. So perhaps you can walk us through some of the key elements of a high converting product listing on Amazon US or a direct-to-consumer website storefront.
Yeah, probably ties into my 4Ws, right? Product clarity. And I have that checklist again. I can send you on LinkedIn if you guys are interested, and I think it will tactically walk through that. Reviews, obviously, important. So I think whether that's D2C or Amazon, those are going to be still relevant. But I will say one thing, especially with LLM optimization or what we call AEO, so organic optimization via ChatGPT, Perplexity, that's becoming a bigger thing, obviously, with AI mode here in the US, is really keying in on even the technical side of your website, your D2C site, making sure that it's as crawlable as possible. Page speed, right? So again, more D2C specific, making sure those elements, because if it can't be crawled effectively either by Google or these LLM providers, doesn't matter how great your messaging and content is, it's just not going to make it. So that is just as equally important, if anything, maybe more important, because if it's not crawlable, it doesn't matter how good your creative and messaging is. So those specifics, again, I line out in the checklist, but I'd say those are two things to be aware of, especially with AI optimization going forward.
Thanks so much, Ruben. We'll bring in all of our speakers today, including our commissioner. Again, I want to thank all of our speakers for their generous time in today's session, my colleagues in the room today here in Brisbane, and our US team led by Vicky, Hannah, Anise, and my other colleagues in the US. Thank you so much for your time today. We will be in touch again with a post-event survey. My colleague will put in a slide with a QR code. If you can scan that code with any of your feedback on today's session. We will be holding our next session with our Global E-Commerce Masterclass, which will be held on the ASEAN Southeast Asian markets on the 19th of June. We encourage that you register and join us for that session. Thanks again so much for all of your time today. And we will be in touch with a post-event survey, which will include a link to this presentation. Again, there is the QR code. Please feel free to share your thoughts on today's webinar. Many thanks from TRQ. Thank you.